How's it going, everybody? Welcome to week 2 here, moving right along. Hopefully everyone's getting used to the semester and Lamaku and online stuff. Yeah, 2025, here we go. This week we're kind of getting a little bit more into Mesopotamia, looking a little bit more of what makes the society run, function. And just thinking about civilization in general. We're spending a little time here because a lot of the what we learn about the civilizations in Mesopotamia, we can then extract and look and compare and contrast with other civilizations that we'll come up with and come into contact here with pretty soon. Before we do that, I just want to in the student resources section, I uploaded the Padlet of Padlet 1, the city, create a city. Good job on that. Again, I think we have a pretty good function of that. Again, one reason why I like this exercise is because everyone kind of does whatever they want, but you see that when everything comes together, the city will run pretty effectively. We have potters, and people explain why pottery was good. Merchants moving things around, setting up markets. Farmers obviously are very important, feeding everyone, but also the knowledge they have of seasons and plants and animals, all of that stuff. Herbalists, judges, good. Lacos of Hammurabi, we talked about today. Play into that. I mean, there was a judge class. There was justice. Justice keeps order, keeps these cities together. Scribes to write things down. Good. A lot of people were part of the military. That's very important. Defend your city, but also if you need to attack other cities. Priests, good. I mean, there's definitely the Epic of Gilgamesh talks about sort of the religion of Mesopotamia, and they have very developed, highly developed sort of deity group, host of gods and goddesses. Every city has their own city god, which we talked about. And the ziggurat is where a lot of this religion took place, the main temple of every city. Could we have artists creating things, jewelries, bakers? I think that was an important one too. Bakers are important because they kind of show this sort of middleman, right? They're taking the raw materials of what is produced in the fields, wheat or barley, milling that down to flour and then turning it into bread, right? Sort of and then bringing that to market, selling that. So they played a big role in that. Because somebody was a king, great. We have an architect that I thought was important, right? Building all this stuff. Somebody who was a temple administrator, great. It would kind of be the interface between the priests and the gods and the peoples and all of that stuff, which is great. And I think with all of that, we could have a very functioning city. Some other things that that we might need to bring in there: boat builders, people who actually build these boats that move up and down rivers. One that maybe not everyone wants to be, but definitely existed in this world: slaves. As we see in Lacos of Hammurabi, slavery was very much part of the Mesopotamian world, and you could be put into slavery, born into it, but you could become free, or you're free and then maybe something happens, you go into debt and become slavery. So a little more malleable and flexible than other forms of slavery, but it's definitely part of this world. Another big one that's important: smiths, right? People working with metal, making tools. Again, you would need the raw materials for that. You need the bronze, copper, and tin to make bronze, or iron later on. But that was a skill. Carpenters, builders, people, they're cited in the Lacos of Hammurabi too. Stone cutters, all sorts of things there. So sculptures, a lot of stone building things there. So good job. And again, take a look at that, see what other people put in there. And again, I think it's important to think about these elements, because what was going on now, that just was what we do today, right? Everyone has specializations. As society gets more complex, more specializations come up and are necessary, and then people plug them in. But all those working together bring about modern urban life, or rural life. We still need those farmers. We still need and that's very important to society as well. All right, great. So that's the Padlet City. It's in the student resources submodule. Also some student announcements in there. Some things on scholarships, grad internships, and Lunar New Year's is coming up. We're going to have an event on Monono campus on Wednesday the 29th. Great. And the rest of the stuff, just a little bit more about Mesopotamia. the one lecture about sort of the kingdoms there. Again, just kind of to give you a broad idea of what was going on politically. The Babylonians, the Assyrians, with the Babylons, we get Hammurabi, which is Lacodes, which is a primary source we read about this week. And then another big one there is Ashurbanipal of the Assyrians. There's sort of two competing factions. He's important because this Library of Nineveh that he recorded a lot of artifacts or a lot of records, and then those were sort of kept, and because they're clay, they didn't go anywhere. So we have a lot of information about Mesopotamia from this library. That's where the Epic of Gilgamesh was found there. And then the trade networks we talked about. Here's a piece of a chunk of lapis lazuli. This is what the big prized item that was big in the ancient world. What's important about this is anytime you see this, it's only found in Afghanistan. So that kind of, you can trace the trade networks around through these materials. And then the legacy of Mesopotamia, I think, again, if you aren't aware, are ways we count time. 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, 24 hours in a day. That's all Mesopotamian stuff. 360 degrees in a circle. That's this base 60 counting that they had. Language, cuneiform. I put a little video about it. If you want to learn how to write cuneiform, there's a video on it there. Beer. Also, I think beer was I talked about that in the lecture there. So there's those trade networks. Then the other one, Near East societies, the Phoenicians and the alphabet. They were big traders, shipbuilders as well in the Mediterranean world. Connected these civilizations, particularly Mesopotamia and Egypt together, and other ones, Greece as well. And then Hebrews, or the Jewish community, these Hebrews, they spoke their own language, started their own monotheistic religion based on this guy Yahweh by Abraham. I mean, that's the basis we talked about, the Old Testament. So a lot of the Old Testament stories of creation myths, Genesis, that's all from foundation of Judaism. And if you're not aware, Judaism then sparks Christianity and Islam. They're all sort of Abrahamic religions. So it's kind of where that comes from, a little bit history of Judaism there in the Levant, in Israel, Jerusalem. And then the two big readings this week, Epic of Gilgamesh and Lacodes of Hammurabi. These are both primary sources, so they're from the time. And really, when you're reading those, both lectures I gave on that, right, is what can we learn about the society there? I mean, one epic literature, right, all epic literature has major tropes and ideas of what these worlds are. So, we're going to be dealing with epics for the rest of this semester. And like I said, you guys are going to be reading an epic yourself. So, what can we learn from these? I gave you just one chapter of this epic, chapter 3, which I think is very important or interesting too, is sort of the roles of humans and gods, right? Ishtar wants to marry Gilgamesh. He's like, I don't know, thank you, right? And that sparks Ishtar's revenge, and then Enkidu and Gilgamesh defeat this bull of heaven, but then Enkidu is killed or has to die, and then there's this lament from, I gave a song in that, you can hear it. A lot of stuff was listened to too. I mean, we're reading it, but it was written down, but it was meant to be sung and heard. And Gilgamesh's lament is one of the famous early song of the ancient world. And then Hammurabi's Lacodes, if you read through those, I mean, we can really get an insight into how these laws, which for the daily life of Mesopotamia, we really get to see that. We get to see the role of judges. What, you got to bring a case, right? And if you don't, right, you'll get thrown in the river. What are the different punishments? You can get fines, you can get arms chopped off. Right? There's sort of eye for an eye that comes out of Hammurabi's world. But also we get to see, the roles of slaves and the different sort of classes, freemen and slaves. We get to see family stuff. We get to see roles of farmers and family dynamics. And then kind of the end of that is sort of the different rules for different professions, right? Exactly what we did with the city stuff there. So that's that. So, and then the assignment this week is our first discussion post. Again, choose one of those three, not all three. Either do Paleolithic, Neolithic that we sort of talked about last week, or talk about cities a little more. How do these cities form? What are unique to them in Mesopotamia? Name a few of them, and kingdoms as well. And then, or delve in a little deeper to the readings. What does this tell us about society? And in those, choose one and cite something from those readings themselves. All right, great. Have a good rest of your week.